Hey everybody, we're here on a Father's Day morning, mid-June. We're at our leased farm. We've been here we're in our fourth grazing year. It's about a 150-acre property that we've sort of gradually been fencing in. And we showed you a little today about how we do our subdivision fencing, all of our temporary polywire work. This is sort of working off of the perimeter high tensile that we installed initially, along with strategic water lines. And that's really important when you're trying to do a holistic plan grazing, or whatever you would call it. You really have to properly think about your permanent fencing and really trying to minimize the amount of permanent fencing, and that's usually going to be the perimeters of strategic grazing cells and fields. Sometimes we will have to invest in a little bit of forestry mulching to make sure that we're fencing into the shade. And where we don't have shade, and we'll talk about this in another video, how we're able to use our sort of planned rest periods to let certain pioneer trees establish. You won't see it behind me, but we've got trees that are pushing 12 foot tall. Persimmon and pecan primarily are the pioneers here that aren't heavily grazed by our livestock, but they can quickly provide shade in the field. And what we're doing more on our home farm is coming in and we're grafting on selected cultivars on those. But whether you're doing that or not, they're providing distributed shade for rotational grazing, among other benefits, pulling up nutrients and whatnot that have leached through our upper soil profiles. But so this is a very scalable thing. We're down to about 2 polywires, and we can get by with 1. But here we're still running lambs. They've yet to be weaned. They are. We'll be weaning the ram lambs here in a couple weeks. But this stuff goes out very quickly, as we showed. Just being able to attach them onto an ATV, run out of line, throw in temporary post, hook on, and then come on back, unrolling the reels. So it's a pretty quick and efficient method. Some of this we got tips from just watching Greg Judy videos, but you know, we've done these things plenty the hard way and started off with netting, and which is great for small scale. But once you start scaling up, you really have to find a more efficient way to subdivide. So we this may look like a pretty wild weedy pasture, but it's when you kind of look in here, you still see a lot of clover that's established. You know, we love the Johnson grass. Even things like dogbane are something that, you know, you're told is toxic to animals or to sheep, and but they particularly love it and do a good job of really kind of keeping it in check. But you know, we love the tall grass grazing. They get a lot of benefit from eating the seed heads and cool season grasses as it's maturing, and just kind of seeing the whole flush of diverse, you know, forbs and whatnot that are coming up in here. So we've done very little amendment of soil. I mean, we've put out a little bit of high cal compost, but we're kind of just letting things evolve. So. Okay, so what you're seeing here are sort of three components. We've got our perimeter high tensile. In this case, this is actually 4 strands of high tensile, with the highest line being around 32 inches, which allows us to hop or step over it in about any location on the farm. Very convenient. We're using, in this case, we've got these timeless fence posts. Again, a rather newer technology, but it seems to be working out pretty well. And from here, now this fence line is sort of fencing out alongside this permanent road corridor, so that's always a place you would put permanent fencing. And then we're grazing perpendicular to that across the field and breaking up our paddocks with geared reels using braided polywire.
Can you show me that gear?
This is not our particular favorite brand, but here's the Tarragate. Seems to be the most durable. But what we're doing then to make this hot and to save on extra work is just wrapping the lines to get this fence to the polywire hot, and using the actual reel and hook to conduct the current through that. So it's important to do this top wire first, so that if you're doing the bottom wire first, then when you go to do the top wire, you're going to eventually have some sag and you're going to get shocked. So, you know what, like I said, this gets wrapped, 2 times on the top. You could go more. And then the bottom one, we wrap 3 or more times, just depending on how tight. And when you're having, you really can't get this too tight. So if animals earlier on are you're having lambs learning the fence and they're trying to push under it, you want some resistance to it. But anyway, that just gets hooked on there, and now you've got 2 hot lines and you're good to go. And it takes time. I mean, we've been doing this gosh, I don't know, 12 years now when we started with sheep, and it takes time to sort of develop and select animals that respect the polywire. So, you just can't necessarily expect to purchase some sheep and jump right into using 1 or 2 strands of polywire. Sheep are certainly easier to contain than goats, but they're going to be harder to contain than, say, cattle and pigs. But, it does, and we've been doing this 12 years, and it's taken, throughout time, just selective breeding of the animals that are respected, and those that don't are basically sold at auction or whatnot. So you have to develop the genetics to animals that respect your system, and maybe you need to start off with 3. I mean, we've never had to do that. We went from netting to 2 and from 2 to 1, but it takes time. And if you are purchasing animals, it helps starting from a producer that's doing a low input operation that already has animals that are trained to a polywire system. So it's a huge game changer from dealing with netting to going to this system where, again, you can buy, reels up to with 1,320 feet of line, and you can just subdivide very effectively large acres. So our fencing is set up for both cattle and sheep. We started adding some steers into the flock a couple years ago. So the 32 inches high on the high tensile is plenty for, a good domestic. These are South Pole cattle. They're not going to be as wild or eager to jump a fence line. The watering, I mean, we're just using these 50-gallon troughs. It's enough to supply. I mean, we're at 150 breeding ewes and 3 steers, so they're not going to draw it down faster than this can recharge. And what I didn't mention earlier too was the water line that is we install along our main roads and access points where we're grazing. So it's often along primary roads or ridges, where you can see on this other field, we've subdivided along the ridge. That's where we ran another high tensile line to jumper off to, and then we added more water. So we've got buried water line using Poisson pop-up valves every 100 feet, encased in just like SDR 35 pipe that we can cut really cheap to make a valve cover. So that is another critical element besides the shade and the fencing, is having the water. And we've certainly messed around toting water, and that's, you know, definitely a way to start when you're, you know, if you don't have a long-term lease. But when you're able to, and quickly as you can, as you scale up, you really need to have permanent water. So we've got a well back here that serves about half the farm, and we've got pretty much water line everywhere we need it.